Hello, Fire Tribe.
We're getting Rooney, we're getting loony, we're getting Rooney.
What's good? It's Norse month. It's Norse month. The man, the myth, the legend, Benjamin Balderson.
Odin chose on that day, knowing he was going to die, that these forces that were destroying the world that he had built and the things that he had loved, they're coming with him.
It's Norse month.
We're getting Rooney, we're getting loony, we're getting Rooney.
Shape-shifting dwarf. Sulfur and that salt don't do any good without the oil to open them up. Shape-shifting dwarf.
Thor tries to pick up the cat, and he can't get the cat off the ground. And he's so strong, and he gets like 3 tries to pick up the cat, and he only gets 1 paw off.
We're getting Rooney.
You can't control everything that there is. You don't have power over everything. You're just a human. It's humbling. It's to show you that you're just a part of the whole piece. You're not any more powerful than Thor. You can't control everything that there is. You don't have power over everything. You're just a human.
And then she puts him back together with the 14 pieces, and that's the 14 days of the waxing moon, except for his penis, which she uses to impregnate herself over and over again, which that's part of my, when I talk about the biochemical universe, when I talk about the interactions between the sun and the moon, and I say that the moon impregnates the sun, it's right there in that story. And she takes his penis and impregnates herself over.
Hey, Fire Tribe. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful July day. We are in the midst of summer, and what a summer it is. What a summer it is. July is always such a fun month, honestly. Crazy energies going on, and you gotta love it. So we have a new format to the show. We're adding news segments, but we're bringing in what we call field researchers, like segments to, a show, like a TV show, right? But we're bringing in awesome people that know their stuff and have things to share. So each episode you will get a news segment which is basically a mini interview with someone amazing, and then we'll get right on to the interview. As well as the fun little jams in the beginning. We think we're creating a really cool format here. We want to know what you think, so go over to the Telegram, join that family, join that tribe. It's growing all the time, and the people that are there, the amazing existers, the goodness that is the Fire Tribe, it's such an amazing community, and everybody is just sharing information, sharing stories. We're building here, and that's what we are all doing every day, is building community structure in our lives, and just outside bringing in so the inside can flow out and have that beautiful toroidal field flowing and growing. So go on over to the Telegram, tell us what you think of the show, let us know what you're doing, what's up, how's it going, and just join the conversation. Outside of that, I also want to give a big thanks to our Patreon members, because you guys are allowing us to create extra beautiful content, and it just shows that what we're doing is, it means something, and that's why we do this. We have a lot of love and a lot of information, and make a difference, make a change however we can, as well as, growing and learning ourselves. and that's a beautiful part of the show. But this is turning into such a beautiful bloomage of community and so much more. And so with the Patreon, it's $3 a month, and we get to have private chats. You guys get extra content. There's at least 40 hours of content on there now of stuff that hasn't been released, and you know how it goes. Support is as support does. Support local, support however and whenever to whoever and whyever, and watch all of the beautiful energy just get recreated. It's all just flowing. Anywho, I hope you guys enjoy this new format we're doing, and I can't wait to see you guys on the other side.
Hello, welcome Fire Tribe. It's that time. It's RFTA News. And here we go with Adam Stokes. Adam, how's it going, man?
I'm doing great. What's up, Dan?
Good. How was your trip? Last time we talked, you were going to go to Rome.
Yeah. I just got back last week. It was great. I walked more than I ever have in my life. In fact, I had on my Fitbit that I walked like close to 8 miles because it was like a walking tour that we did of Rome.
Yeah.
So we walked like everywhere, but it was really cool seeing all the stuff that I talk about in my boring Latin classes. It kind of came to life for me. So we saw the Colosseum. We saw Nero's big freaking palace. We saw, my favorite thing, I think, was the Vatican.
Oh, you went to the Vatican?
Yeah, we went to the Vatican. We went to the Sistine Chapel.
Ooh.
And we saw the Vatican Museum, which had all of this ancient art in it, Greek and Roman art. And I was just blown away. I could have stayed in there for hours, but it was like a moving tour. So they just said, keep moving. There was like some Swiss guard dude there who's like going to kick our butts if we didn't keep moving. So we just kept moving into the Sistine Chapel and then into St. Peter's Basilica, which was probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was huge. It's like it's a church. It's like almost like a city in and of itself. It has all of these different like tunnels and different rooms that the priests go into. And there's like a treasury room, and there's a room with the cross of Christ in it, or a piece of the cross of Christ supposedly in it. But just amazing. My wife and I had a blast.
Wow, that's awesome. I'm happy for you and jealous of you. I have a couple questions for you about that. Is there anything that you thought was going to be more amazing and you're kind of let down by it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was kind of let down by the Colosseum, and I was like, because I've wanted to see the Colosseum like all my life. You see these movies, Gladiator, Pompeii. Yeah. There's always a Colosseum in there, and it's basically, I mean, they've kept it up well, but it's basically rubble. It's like being in like a cemetery. It didn't really vibe with me. It's just a ruin. It literally is like a ruin. Like, yeah. So, it was cool being in there, but it didn't. I thought I'd be really, really excited. I was more excited about St. Peter's Basilica than I was about the Colosseum.
Yeah. No. Then the other question is kind of the opposite of that. Is there something that you didn't think was going to be that great? It was better than you could have imagined?
Yeah, I thought, honestly, I guess I give a shout out to the Catholic Church here, but I was really amazed with the Vatican, with all of its history and the museum. When we first came to Rome, I was like, I have to see the Colosseum. I have to see the Senate. I have to see where Julius Caesar was killed. And I got to see all that stuff. That stuff was really cool. But I was blown away by the Vatican. The Vatican was like a secondary thing. We went with my sister-in-law and her husband. She's a pastor. She's not Catholic, but the Vatican is where St. Peter and Paul were. So she wanted to see that. And I was like, I've seen all the ancient Roman stuff. I'll do the Vatican kind of as an afterthought. But it turned out that it was a really cool experience.
Awesome,
and I was like I said, I was blown away, completely blown away by St. Peter's Basilica.
Wow. Excellent. You got any, what did you got for us today on the news, Adam?
All right. Well, this is, I have a little article here that I wrote in March of last year on the Los Lunas stone. I think I've mentioned this before, but this is one of several things that we have in the United States which attest to kind of a Hebrew or Jewish presence in ancient America. It's a stone in Los Lunas, New Mexico, that is written in Hebrew and contains basically a paraphrase of the Ten Commandments. And I contacted, there's a woman who is basically the head librarian in Los Lunas who does a lot of research on this. She was able to give me a lot of information about the Los Lunas stone, which I hadn't heard of before. But this is something that has fascinated me for years, Dan. And the reason for that is that there are a couple of things about it that go against the view that it is a hoax or a forgery, which is what people, especially critics, like to argue.
Okay. What's Los Lunas mean? And is that a Native American word or is it a Spanish word?
That's a Spanish word. I think it means the moons, I think. So I think, don't quote me on that. My Spanish is always kind of bad, but I think it means the moons. But it's interesting because you mentioned is it Native American? Our earliest references to the Los Lunas stone come from Native American tradition in the 1820s, and that's important because a lot of critics will say this was something that was made much later in the late 1800s by basically the Mormon militia. They wanted to forge something to show that Israelites were in America to kind of coincide with Mormon theology. But the earliest oral traditions of this are before even the existence of Mormonism as a religion in America. And a couple things I'll note about it. One, it's written in Paleo Hebrew, which I think I've mentioned before.
Yeah.
But that is the script that was used by the Jews and the Israelites prior to 538 BCE. So if this is legit, then it dates to before that time. So we're talking about something that is very, very old. And there's some features in it that suggest that it's really old as well. So in the history of languages, and you get this in Hebrew, as a language develops, things contract over time, words get smaller. But in the Los Lunas stone, a lot of words are spelled their full spelling. So the word for face, paneha, pay, noon, hey, is spelled out fully. That reduces to just p or pani in later Hebrew. But here it's in its full kind of Proto-Semitic spelling, which is good evidence that we're dealing with something that is genuine from the time period of the 6th century BCE or before. There's also, so like I said, this is a paraphrase of the Ten Commandments. If you guys ever watched that movie with Charlton Heston, and you see the scene where God gives the Ten Commandments on the stone. There's a really interesting variant about the Sabbath day. And it says to remember the Sabbath day because you guys were slaves in Egypt and now you're free. So follow the Sabbath day. Now, that's interesting because in the biblical account of the Ten Commandments that most people are familiar with, the justification for the Sabbath is that God created the world in 7 days. That is actually a very, very late justification that comes from something that biblical scholars would call the priestly source, which is after the destruction of the Jerusalem temple in 586 BCE, where the theology of the priestly author. Let me go back here because I don't want to confuse people too much. So the priestly author is one of the authors of the Pentateuch, or the first 5 books of the Bible, and basically the Bible begins with the priestly version of creation. So the priestly author, who's a very late author, his tradition is what actually begins the Bible. So the famous phrase, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and the 7-day creation, that comes from the priestly source. And in the book of Exodus, the Decalogue that's in there, the 10 Commandments that are in there, are from the priestly source. So why do you follow the Sabbath? Not because you were slaves in Egypt, but because God created the world in 7 days. So the fact that here with the Los Lunas stone, the justification is given that they were slaves in Egypt, suggests an earlier source, an earlier source that goes back to a time before the priestly office. So long story short, whatever we're dealing with here appears to be very, very old.
Wow. Interesting. And this is in Arizona, New Mexico.
New Mexico. Yep.
Okay.
So this is always what's fascinating me so much about the Los Lunas stone is that it kind of shows the migration. So migration of whoever these Hebrew Jewish people were. I've argued on your show and elsewhere that they were some type of giants, but we kind of see their movement, from the East Coast to the Midwest, which was their main place of operation, and they seem to have even gone further southwest into New Mexico.
I was listening to a book today about Egypt. I can't remember the whole book, but it was by Gerald Massey, and
I've heard the name. Yeah.
He said that there was a group of people in the retelling, because I listened to it on Audible. It said that the people from Yisrael came down to Egypt because they had cattle and everything. They needed to find sustenance for their cattle. And these people of Yisrael became the Israelites.
Yep. So Yisrael is actually the name for Israel in Hebrew. So yeah, he's absolutely correct about that. And
but it gave me like Yggdrasil vibes.
Interesting.
Like the tree of life.
Yeah. Well, very fascinating. There's a lot of links between the South American tree of life and the biblical tree of life mentioned in the Bible. And in fact, going back to my trip to Rome, the Catholic Church, when it started to explore kind of the New World and ran into basically the traditions of the native South Americans and the South American tree of life, they were so impressed by the parallels, they thought that they had reached actually the Garden of Eden, the biblical Garden of Eden, which contains the tree of life in it, in South America. So there are a lot of really big parallels between the South American tree of life and the biblical tree of life. There's a movie out by one of my favorite directors, Darren Aronofsky. He did Requiem for a Dream, Noah, couple other movies, but he did a movie called The Fountain, where he makes that connection explicit. So the tree of life in the Bible is the same tree of life in South America.
Huh. Interesting, man. Do you think there's multiple like trees of life or multiple gardens?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that much. I mean, just in my own religious tradition, I come from a Latter-day Saint tradition. We actually believe that the Garden of Eden was in, I know this sounds crazy to other people, but I do believe it. I'll put myself out there. I'll believe it. I do believe it, in Jackson County, Missouri. So what's now Independence, Missouri. So
is that why the arch in St. Louis?
Possibly. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So
that's fascinating.
Yeah, Missouri
thing, man.
is.
Well, you hear a lot about.
I could go all into that, but
you hear a lot about these naval cities in antiquity. There's the umbilicus. There's a word for it, but I forget what it's called. But it seems like they're spread out all over the place. They're not necessarily in one area. So the umbilicus or the navel would be like the center of something. So it's just I was wondering if maybe there's some parallels there too, to also like the garden, and maybe there's just multiple different areas, or maybe like
I
something
think so. I mean,
started from these different places in different areas. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, people have always speculated there are multiple sites. Some people say Garden of Eden was in Africa. Some people say that, I mean,
Mhm.
the standard within biblical scholarship is that it was in Babylon, what's now, Iran, Iraq,
Mhm.
that area. But people have speculated that the Garden of Eden was could have been in a variety of places. My own personal opinion, like I said, I think in the Western Hemisphere where we are is where it was located, either North America or with the Tree of Life tradition in South America, it could have been located there as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, man. Yeah. All right, man. Is that all you got for us today, Adam?
That's pretty much it. Yep, yep. So I enjoyed. I hadn't looked at this article for a while. So, but like I said, I've had a fascination with the low lunar stone for a while. It's one of those things where critics come at it, but they can't really debunk it. It's there. It's been there for a really long time.
So it's got all the 10 commandments on it then.
Yes.
Is it, do they differ at all from like the typical 10 commandments that we have? Is there any difference in the language or some of the words? Because I know
It's
like
a
in your book,
paraphrase.
From Egypt to Ohio, you kind of go through 3 different languages, and you kind of notice subtle differences in the translation a little
Yep.
bit. Is there any of that in
Yep.
this?
It's it's a paraphrase, so it reduces a lot of stuff. It doesn't say the command,
Okay.
doesn't give all of the words in a particular commandment like you get in the book of Exodus or the book of Deuteronomy. So it reduces some stuff. For the most part, though, it follows what you get in the biblical text. Like I said, the spelling of particular Hebrew words is not contracted, which lends, I think, to its authenticity of being in an ancient text before the 7th century, 6th or 7th century BCE.
BC. Wow.
Yep.
That's a long time ago. And I mean, well, the Ohio mounds, they say those go back to about 3100 BC. So
Exactly. Yep.
is there have people come up with any connection between the Ohio Valley civilization and the civilization in New Mexico? Well, it's
Well,
also
it's
next to
interesting.
Arizona too, in the Grand Canyon. People speculate of
Yep.
Egyptian stuff in the Grand Canyon. So
Yeah, which there almost certainly is. So they found some amazing stuff in the Grand Canyon. It's interesting because Edgar Casey, he argued for I think I mentioned this before, Jewish migration way back around 3000 BCE, which would, based on his dating, we'd have to kind of redate how biblical scholars date the biblical narrative and the biblical material. But if that's the case, then it kind of coincides with when these mounds are being built in North America, right around that same time. It's always been my contention, Dan, that there wasn't just one migration of Jews at a particular time, but multiple migrations of these Egypto-Israelites, as I like to call them, and they knew the route, and so they came. They came multiple times, and the Los Lunas stone is one example of their migration once they got here, migrating through what is now the United States.
So I have one more question. This might be a little off, but what do you think about the idea of maybe possibly Atlantis being in the Atlantic, and what we see in the Americas and what we see in Egypt and Africa was just 2 separations from the same place, but
I think,
east and west, and maybe
I think
maybe that's why they.
I think that's exactly what happened.
Oh, really?
So Atlantis was destroyed and people migrated, and this is what, to some extent, accounts for the diffusionism that we see throughout the world, and the similarities that we see throughout the world. I think, especially with the pyramids, that's retaining this ancient knowledge that comes from Atlantis, and in the Caribbean, especially. I think I mentioned this before. My friend Heather Arnold does a lot of work on this. But in the Caribbean, there are a lot of traditions about that being, if not Atlantis itself, a colony of Atlantis. And there are a lot of traditions about giants and advanced ancient tech that the natives have about Atlantis.
Fascinating, man. Well, hopefully we can start putting the pieces together, huh?
Yes.
All right. Well,
I
thank
think
you.
it's important. I mean, so for so long, people have just rejected diffusionism, but it's everywhere, man. So we got to put the pieces together.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Adam, for joining us today and giving us that tidbit. We appreciate it. And have a good one. See you next week.
Thanks. My pleasure, Dan. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you very much. What's up, Fire Tribe? Also on RFTA News today, we have Fallon Christelle from Phoenix Rising Herbals. How you doing, Fallon?
Wonderful. How are you doing?
Did I get that all right? Did I pronounce that all right?
Yes.
All right. Excellent.
Absolutely.
So I saw Fallon. She had liked an Instagram photo of a guest that we had on, Liza Gupta. And when I saw the name, I was like, what? Come on. What more coincidence do I need? So I decided to reach out to her and ask her if she would do some herbal news segments for the show. And she agreed. And so here she is. How you doing, Fallon? Do you want to tell people a little bit about yourself or anything before we get started?
Sure. I'm so happy to be here. I am going to be getting my herbal company up and running soon. So I'm just so excited to have the opportunity to talk about what I love, and that is getting back to the earth and
Yes.
how all of us, can bring some of these beautiful healing qualities of plants into our lives. And happy to be here to share what I know.
Excellent, man. We're happy to have you. So what do you got for us today?
So recently, I don't know if y'all have felt this full moon this week,
Yeah.
but I feel like it was a really intense one. And I feel really called lately in the past few weeks, personally and professionally, to really learn more and dive more into plants that help us with protecting ourselves and holding our hearts and our boundaries. And so there's a plants that I think are really gentle and powerful with helping us to hold on to boundaries and to maintain strong boundaries in our relationships, professionally, personally, help our children with mood, with boundaries. And so I have a few of those plants that I like to talk about today. And I think that those plants are readily available to everybody and really gentle. And so I thought I would start there and see where that takes us.
Excellent. Sounds good.
Nice. One of the first plants that I wanted to talk about today was lemon balm. Good old Melissa of Nutritionalist. Have you had lemon balm before? Have you tried the tea? Tincture?
Isn't it like in some chapsticks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, it is. Yeah, for sure. So lemon balm has a rich, rich history of helping people with matters of the heart, but also helping with our immune systems. And so you find it in a lot of formulas that have lysine and garlic or other plants that actually help with keeping viruses at bay. Certain type of herpes zoster viruses that store themselves in our nervous system, like mono or like certain strains of herpes. So you'll find lemon balm in a lot of chapsticks. You can apply it topically to cold sores. You can drink it internally to help with fever, immune system. But lemon balm is so delicious. And so one of my favorite things to do is to stuff some of the fresh plant. It grows so readily. If you plant a little bit of lemon balm, it is a mint family plant. So it just takes over the area. And you can just stuff a jar with a lot of the fresh leaves, squeeze a little lemon in there, and you can make a nice, rich, beautiful sun tea in about 6 hours. And that's a really simple way to connect with the plant. Definitely using it in so many different ways. Like traditionally, it was used to help folks dream of their future husband or wife. And so they would take some, put it under their pillow, and they would dream of their future spouse. It can help with matters of the heart. It can help with a restful sleep. It's a nervine. And so in herbal language, that just means that it's a tonic for the nervous system. And that's one of my favorite things about it. And so you can bite on a leaf, or you can have some tea or tincture, and it can really help to ground you, soothe those frazzled nerves that a lot of us are feeling
How,
as
do,
of
how,
late.
how does it work under your pillow? Is it because you're smelling it and it's getting in through your nostrils, or what's the thing
I
there?
think that great question. I think that plants, especially something like lemon balm that has a lot of volatile oils in it, you can really smell the lemon and the mint. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a piece of it. I think another piece of it is just the spirit of the plant.
Ah,
It's
yes.
just beautiful, and being able to speak to plants, or at least honor the plants, is a really big part of my practice. Before I harvest wild or in my own garden, I will ask the plant if it's okay if I take some for medicine, and honoring that plant, or giving a little bit of tobacco, or giving a little bit of something back to the earth for what you're taking, I think is really important to recognize. But definitely both. I think the olfactory power is so intense with being able to send signals directly to the brain. That's definitely part of its magic.
Yeah.
Sure.
Excellent.
So lemon balm is one of my favorite plants for kids. I've actually taught to some kids in preschool about lemon balm, and we all got to sit in a circle and taste it and make tea with it.
Is it sour?
It is a little sour. It's definitely got that lemon quality, but it has that mint flavor in the background. So it's really tasty. You can add a little bit of lemon peel in that sun tea, or, kind of bring that flavor out a little bit. But oh, it was so beautiful to see kids use it later when they were upset. Oh, I'm upset. I'm going to go grab a lemon balm leaf. And I kind of see how you can really switch your mood around with just a little bit of plant medicine. It was really beautiful. So I'm really honored to be able to have done that, and to have those memories. But lemon balm, definitely a good ally to have at home.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share, or is that all for today?
I think that that's one of the plants I wanted to talk about. The other one I wanted to talk about is yarrow. And yarrow is a major plant for helping to maintain healthy boundaries with folks. And it's a beautiful warrior plant. Its Latin name is Achillea millefolium. They actually used to use it in battle. Soldiers would wounds, and people would take a poultice and just chew up some yarrow and just stuff it into the wound, and it stops bleeding. So it's an amazing ally to have. I like to make salve with it for bumps and bruises and minor injuries. I like to take the tincture, take the flower essence for strong, healthy boundaries emotionally, physically. When you're struggling in relationships, or when you are in the service of people like I am, I actually go and help people in a health food store, and they bring a lot of their problems to me. And I sometimes wear yarrow on me just to make sure that I'm keeping that strong boundary. My energy is mine, yours is yours. Those types of situations, yarrow is really useful for too. But yarrow is great for fever for kids as well. I mean, I could go on and on about this plant. It's such an ally for warriors. So yarrow has a lot of different colors: yellow, white, pink. You probably have seen it around. It grows in gardens readily this time of year. So next time you see yarrow in your garden, or while you're out and about, definitely talk to the plant, or ask it for its wisdom, or you could take a bit and hold it to your heart and help you maintain those strong boundaries, or keep some for the next time you have an injury.
Yeah.
It's great. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It always blows my mind how many medicinal qualities some of these plants that we just pass by and don't even think twice about, how many different things they can help with. And getting people off pharmaceutical drugs and all this stuff, and realizing that some of these things that can help us the best are just growing right next to the sidewalk or growing in our gardens is an
Yes.
amazing thing. And so to get people out and be aware of these things is very, very good. So thank you. Appreciate it. And
Oh, my.
yeah. And is there anywhere that people can go to find you if they have any questions or they want to stay in contact or anything like that? Or
Yes. So for now, until I get my website up and coming and get some ducks in a row, you can always reach out at Phoenix Rising Herbals on my Instagram, and I am offering personal herbal and nutritional health consultations. So you can send me a DM or reach me there. And keep an eye on my page. I'm going to be busting out some medicines. I have some tinctures and some medicines brewing as we speak. After about 6 weeks, those will be ready to press. And I'll be offering medicines that you can buy or personal consultations, or I'm here for any questions or helping anyone find their plant allies.
excellent. Thank you so much. That's very good. We appreciate it. This was Chris or Fallon's first time on a podcast, so give her some credit. And thank you, Fire Tribe, for listening.
Wake up.
Fire Tribe, where you at?
I hope you ready. Rising from the ashes and it's getting heavy. Conspiracies, we got plenty and some are scary. From aliens to Bigfoot, extraordinary. Yeah. Dan Unaki, Dan and the homie Romy. I was bugging out all the crazy things he showed me. Jesus bloodlines to the stars in the skies. Always a good time vibing with the Fire Tribe. Hey, so wake up, get it cracking. Rise out the ashes, I know you got a passion. Kick off the convo with theories, many conspiracies, other dimensions, plenty ancient history. Fire Tribe, where you at? Wake up. We about to get into it. I know you can't get enough. At home, at work, it don't matter. Turn it up. Rising from the ashes. You know what's up. Hey. Rising from the ashes.
Hello, Fire Tribe. Welcome to
Rising
from the Ashes. I'm Dan Unaki Dan.
I'm the homie rummy. What's happening, baby?
What's good? It's Norse month. Feeling
Norse month. Norse
Feeling it,
month.
yeah?
We're getting Rooney. We're getting loony. We're getting Rooney.
We got our second guest tonight. The man, the myth, the legend, Benjamin Balderson.
Benjamin Balderson.
How you doing, Ben?
Hail, guys.
Hail.
Thanks
Hail.
for inviting me on again.
Yeah, man. Always a pleasure talking to you. This is the first time that me and Roman have both been able to talk to you. I've talked to you alone on my solo show on Patreon, and we talked about Odinism, and then we talked on Rising from the Ashes about alchemy and Norse mythology a little bit.
Yeah, I was real bummed I missed out on that one.
And I actually got to spend time with Romy in person. We've been to each other's houses, hung out. It's a good time.
Yeah.
He got to come enjoy the rawness of the farm.
Yep. Look at this right here. Peacock Feather. Oh, you can't
Excellent.
see it. It's right there, yeah. Sping. Which, in case you guys didn't know, which I'm sure you do, the peacock is a symbol of the butamus alchemical process. It does lag my memory as to what part of the process, but peacock is in a bunch of alchemical texts. Do you know what it is, Ben?
You can liken the peacock a lot to the phoenix. And that's due to, and you're going to see this, actually Romy there got one of the very first feathers of this season. But every year, so a male peacock, the one with the big train that everybody visualizes, every year, about July-ish, August, they'll kick that entire thing off. And then they basically run around looking like the girl peacock, which is just kind of a dull gray. They're a little bit shinier in the chest, but other than that, they don't look too much different. And then every year they'll come back. Well, and all of a sudden you have this, just like last year, Henry's tail would reach down to the ground from the top of the chicken coop. Now this year, he he's got at least another 6 inches on that, maybe 8. It's pretty
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, and all of a sudden there's this just big, amazing thing again. Shadow, and well, it's likened to the phoenix, which when you're talking about the great work or making the stone of anything. Now, before I make the stone of something like a plant, like the cannabis plant that Romy likes, we take, and I split it into its salt side and its oil side, and I bring both those things to their epitome. Now, when I put fire to the oil side, it vaporizes and it runs away. Now, Now, when I put fire to the salt side, fire is actually what brought the masculine side together. So all it does is glow, and as soon as you take the fire away, it's back sitting there just like it was before. The fire doesn't do anything to that. And without fire, the feminine side's an oil, and so it's naturally fairly liquid. The masculine side is a salt. So this is a super structured crystalline side. After the alchemical marriage, where these two are united into one, when it's cold, it will sit there hard like the crystal side, which is why it's called the Philosopher's Stone. But as soon as you put heat to it, the entire thing will now vaporize off. And you can vaporize this entire stone and then catch it, and it'll come back, and the whole thing will be just like it was before. So now anything that happens to this, all I got to do is throw it through the fire like the phoenix, and it will come back just like it was before. The salt and the oil will always be bonded.
So even if you're catching it, right, and it drops back down liquid state, and it's going to so you can do that indefinitely?
Yep. And every time it will come back. And you could mix it with coffee grounds, do whatever you want. You throw it back in your alembic, distill it out, it'll come back that perfect stone again. It's just like the phoenix. It's every time now, it's this guy made this perfect masculine and feminine union. And any time now that you put it through the fire, all it's going to do is renew it.
What about separating if you were to add the fixed salt from a vegetable and then the oil from mineral? Are you just fucking with like fate then, or is it just
a lot of times different? They won't the same things won't necessarily open each other up, but it is possible. Mm-hmm. A lot of that is like when you look at the plant salts as opposed to minerals, plant salts open up with basic water, H2O. You know, where depending on the mineral salt, some of them are going to open up with water. Some of them are going to need other things to open them up. And then also the big key to the alchemical marriage at the end is that the sulfur needs to be able to transfer through the mercury and into the salt. So then you get to understand that actually the system, while it's just a masculine and feminine from the salt and oil perspective, that and this is something that Romy's going to actually get, is that as the oil ages, you'll notice that it goes from a clear white and then to an amber. And that amber basically is like picking a vegetable the day that it's ripe, like right off the vine. Later tonight, that thing's rotten, you know, so it starts that degradation process. And then it will move from a yellow to a red, and from a red to mostly a black. And at that point, it doesn't even work for you anymore. It's just garbage. It's just runny, nasty tar, smells dead. And you can take and run that through a distiller, and you can pull that black out. And you can pull the pure THC, the pure CBD, the pure terpenes back out of the system. And each one of those oils, just like olive oil when it's clear, and most those oils, that color is coming from the life, the sulfur element inside of that plant, the true life of it. And when you, as that plant degrades and dies, it goes from, this nice, bright yellow. This is not plant oil. This is my tea. But that color, it goes from that to, again, that reddish, that blackish. And you'll find that the efficacy of the product, no matter what it is it's gone. If it's a spice that you put in your cooking, it doesn't work the way it's supposed to. It doesn't taste the way it's supposed to. All these things are dead in it. The life is dead. So the actual alchemical marriage, that sulfur element is supposed to enliven the salt element and free the trapped soul in the salt element, which I can liken to when you understand, like, the great artists, when they talk about that this sculpture was just in the stone and I only freed it. That's because they had the etheric idea, and that was the salt, and they freed it from the stone and brought the etheric and the salt together. And this thing that's the middle, the eagle that you're looking at now, is the product of those two things. And it's the same idea. That sulfur needs to be able to transfer into the salt. So that's the trick. And that will happen between other things. So it's worth experimentation.
And that's a slow process.
Yeah.
Rather than like a fast process, right? I'm assuming.
If you try to do it fast, that includes higher heat, because that's the way fast works. And you are a chef, sir. How does adding higher heat work when you are trying
slow
to
and
cook?
Slow and low, baby. That's how you do it. Slow and low.
Yeah.
All day. Yeah. Okay, I got two questions, and I know we're focusing on Norse month. We're going runes, but I missed the alchemy talk with you on the first one, so I got two questions. One, what do you think ambrosia is, or what is ambrosia to you? And maybe is there an ambrosia in the Norse mythos? But yeah, because you said amber earlier, and a lot of these old texts are, or just the drink of the gods, right? This fizzy bubbly of the gods. I'm wondering if it was some sort of alchemical mixture.
Oh, 100%. It was some kind of an alchemical mixture. It was probably something fairly close to the Philosopher's Stone. And when you do the Philosopher's Stone, you actually don't take the entirety of the Philosopher's Stone. If you've ever looked at the history of that, literally the Philosopher's Stone is something where I would take that and I would make a tincture with the stone, not heated. So understand that just the barest essence of that is seeping out of it, like making a tea, a sun tea or something. And then I would take a drop of that and I would put it in another cup. I would take a drop of that and put it in another cup. I would take a drop of that. Each time that drop being diluted down into a singular cup. And so that's how you would end up. And then eventually it gets diluted down enough to where then you take just that extraordinarily dilute essence, bare essence of the Philosopher's Stone. So it's always in some kind of a drink. So I'm going to imagine that that is definitely the case. It probably has one thing that a lot of people don't want to realize, but there is a lot of talk, especially with Chris Knowles, guys like that, where they are opening up and with the legalities of cannabis lowering, people are starting to recognize that was components in a lot of these mystical things. I did a real in-depth study of the anointing oil, and but the one they aren't talking about yet was it also contained opioids. So typically you're going to have poppy in there also. And actually the anointing oil specifically was frankincense, myrrh, cinnamon, and cassia. And
ooh, that's strong.
First two, right. So the first two of these open up cannabinoid receptors in your body when you start looking at what it does to you biologically. And the second two open up opioid receptors. And then the two key ingredients in it are then cannabis and opium. So this was the holy anointing oil. Right. So this was the holy anointing oil. Now, part of the and this wasn't, again, heroin or anything like that. This was a more raw opium. So part of when you're trying to have this transcendent experience, I'm going to imagine, and again, I'm not one of them, whichever cosmology we're talking about. But you wouldn't want to have awful pain in your back and your knee hurts. And, just as a normal person, that makes you grumpy. You can't think. The more pain you're in, the more, the worse all that gets. You have a hard time doing the normal tasks you would do. So you're now trying to have this transcendent experience, and you're going to do it with, all those pains. No. So they would put you in a state of comfort and then add in the heightened transcendence, and again, this was like taking anything else. You've got to activate the receptors, and then if you've done that properly, it's going to make that experience that much stronger. Now we're talking about the actual possibility of because obviously as an oil, it is an extract. So now we have our cannabis receptors wide open. We're not in any pain, and now your receptors are wide open, and you hit it with some super high THC extract. Now we're talking about actual psychedelic level experiences from cannabis that everybody's called bullshit on the entire time. They're setting it up for an entirely different experience, and then you are having this transcendent experience. Now, as heathen, I'm not aware of any drinks that we particularly have. There is some talk about goats. There is some goats. There's a goat that the warriors that go to Valhalla. Part of the whole deal with going to Valhalla is, and why they're Odin's chosen, which didn't necessarily make them the best or the greatest, but part of why they needed to be warriors was that was the group that was going to go with him to Ragnarok, that was going to participate in the fight. So when you died, you basically were in this shock troop training up until Ragnarok is what that version. And a lot of people don't realize that there was numerous places you could go after death. And actually, Odin didn't typically even get the first. So Freya usually got the first. And if you were a real good heathen, you probably went to, her hall. And then after that, Odin got his pick. But it was only of basically warriors, but it was for a specific purpose. So beautiful. They had a special goat milk, but there was mushrooms, and that is food of the gods. And they definitely made Amanita muscaria and had experiences through that.
Yeah, so you look at history, all these different regional places, and it's just like, okay, over here they were extracting opium. Over here they were extracting cannabis. Up here they were partaking in psilocybin. These things that do have altered states. And then you look at modernity, and you're like, oh, all these things that were being used by our ancestors are actually terrible. So definitely don't get your hands on those, because you might be able to unlock some, something from the Akashic records or the collective consciousness. We can't have you be doing any of that now. Hold on. Jesus absolutely was not a stoner. Look at the guy. Are you kidding me? His hair looks like this guy doesn't look like he was hanging out with Jerry Garcia. Get out of here. Dan, let's start this off, man. I know you got some. I know you got some questions for Ben here. Let's go.
Yeah, I got all kinds of notes, man. Well, Ben, congratulations on being accepted as a guest at Flattoberfest.
Thank you very much, brother. I've got some new material that I'm working on, and it's really gonna melt people's minds. It's gonna fuck people up, and it flows so well with my other stuff.
Oh, you're
and
bringing
the other
anointing oil. I see.
And then you're right. And then the other speakers that are going to be there already that Karen BFE's lined out are absolutely fantastic. Jason Lindgren from Crow 777 is going to be there. Dave Weiss is always there. Cammie Nodell and Zach from Good Times for All, Cammie Nodell, Bob's wife, are going to be there, and they're putting on a big presentation with a bunch of toys where they're going to show a bunch of magnetic stuff. I've already got she's already kind of let that out a little bit. It's going to absolutely be amazing. And honestly, I really wanted a ticket to it. And I was talking to it's funny because just before that, I got asked to speak, I talked to my wife, and I'm like, well, I'd really like to get those early bird tickets, but we don't have any money right at the moment. And then Karen hits me up. She's like, you want to come speak? And oh, well, problem resolved.
So I know you're like a flat earther, but you're not necessarily a flat earther. It's somewhat different the way that you look at this, right? Because you put a very Norse mythology perspective on it also. Can you go into that a little bit, like how you view it?
Absolutely. So then let's go ahead and start out with, and this is North month, so let's go ahead and start out with the North creation. So in the North creation, things started out, and this is actually the second step, because we don't really have any understanding in the first step, but in the second or even the third step, actually. But by the time this creation story happens, we have three things. We have Gununga Gap, which is the All-Mother. And the Gununga Gap is the immaterial. And that's as opposed to the All-Father, which is the material side. Now, the All-Father was also split, not just the All splitting in the All-Mother and All-Father. The All-Father split in and of itself into two worlds, Niflheim and Muspelheim, the land of ice and the land of fire. Now, at this point, there's still not life. So Gununga Gap starts pulling at the material realm and pulls the lands of ice and fire together. And where these two collide, you have the immovable object in the Niflheim, in the unstoppable force in the Muspelheim, and where these two collide, life is what happens. So you have two circles, and where they crash together, you get the Vesca Pisces, which is basically the cosmic egg. And that's where life happens, is where these two things are mixed together. So in that mix, we have different layers, as you can imagine. As you get closer to Muspelheim, things get more fiery. As you get closer to Niflheim, things get more icy. And so we're talking about chaos and structure. And where
I smell alchemy too.
Absolutely. And we're talking about the oil side and the salt side. And so we as humans, we live in the dead center. And that plane is the only one particularly suitable for us. And that's what most people call the flat earth, is this plane that we live on. And I call that the carbon plane as an alchemist, because that's where the carbon, it's only, we've all heard that 6 inches of topsoil is the only thing keeping all of us alive, right? The carbonated part, that dark black part is carbon in your soil. And when carbon gets cooked out of your soil, it turns into a dead red clay or a sandy. Either way, it doesn't have that nice black carbony look. So anything above the carbon level is all more gassish, and the liquids all go more gassish. The atmospheric pressure goes away. You end up in a plane that we can't naturally exist on. That doesn't mean that that plane doesn't exist. And most flat earthers, at the very least, also acknowledge that there's a firmament, that everything between the plane we live on and the firmament is the airplane. They even call it airplanes, the things that run around up there. Now, everything below us, we have no idea how far down this earth goes. 8 miles is the most any human has been able to drill, and Russia supposedly did the 8-mile drilling, and who knows how far it goes down below that. It stands to reason that on the dense side, which is too dense for us, the crystalline side, that side also has the same approximate shape as the firmament. So we live in the cosmic egg in between two firmaments, and we live on that center line. Everything below us is the salt crystal side. Everything above us is the sulfur side, the oil side. And on our level, we're on the carbon level.
I just want to say, Russians are so far underneath the fucking ground. They keep that shit under wraps. But I guarantee you, Russia is digging constantly. I mean, America's digging too, but man, they're up there. You know, they're northern, right? Like, and I have reason to believe. Vikings. Yes, the Rus Vikings, and they part of the Nephilim, you know, like the giants. So, you know, part of the mythos is that the giants retreat to the mountains and enter Earth. And so I just have an intuitive feeling that like the Russians are very adept inside their cavernous areas there, you know, and doing all sorts of sweet stuff. I love Russians, honestly. I love Russia, and I'm glad that all this crazy shit's going on. Absolutely amazing.
It's just fantastic. I dated a Russian girl for a while. Way too intense for me, and most people are like, "Wow, this dude's intense." But this Russian chick I dated, this is no shit. Her brother was still in high school. I only dated this chick for like 4 or 6 months, something like that. Her dad got into a fist fight in the high school parking lot 2 times. Like, how do you do that? And that's just in the time he's going to pick his kid up. Like, what? Yeah. So we end up splitting up because this chick, she's telling me this story about her cousin, and this cousin, because Russians, one of the things that they really do best, especially when they come over here, is they keep their business to themselves. Something none of us have been taught to do. Like, we act like it's some kind of a weird thing to do your business with your friends if your friends have good business. Like that, other cultures, they do that exclusively. If they have somebody else in their culture that does good business and they need that thing, they are definitely going to their culture first. So Russians do that really, really well. And they would go to this Russian coffee shop with her. She would go with her cousin, and the cousin's boyfriend would call up and have the owner look out, make sure she was there, who she was with, and then take the phone over to her to, you know, further grill her for information. And I'm like, wow, that shit's crazy. And she's like, you don't love me like that? You don't love me like this? I'm like, it's a fucking trick question.
You just start thinking of her dad.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, exactly. And then her grandpa wanted us to get married, and I'm like, and he was actually a Armenian mafia. I'm like, nah, I'm good with her ending up in dumpsters. I'm good with body pieces being put in different dumpsters. I just don't want that.
So
Oh man.
I was listening to the Pros Ada on Audible, and a lot of the stories on there in there are really great, but what it made me think about is kind of like there's this morality of mortality. It's all of these like life lessons that the gods are trying to teach you, so that way you can go through life without having to make these same mistakes before you die, so you can try to achieve a higher level of being before you kind of kick the bucket. And because what you see is a lot of mistakes that they made that ended up leading to their death, or or there's a lot of trickster stuff going on too, though. But so it's just
can we flesh that out?
yeah, for sure.
I know this is your first week, so going Loki with it is a weird thing, and it's right out the gate to start out with Loki.
This is week 2.
But this is really when it's week 2. All right, so I'm not opening it up with it. All guilt is now assuaged. So the few heathens and the Ostru community is largely guilty of this, where they try to bring Christianity to the heathen mythos. But in the heathen mythos, and I fully agree that, and you'll find in Asatru that they don't think the seer ever made any mistakes for the most part. Where, Odin may have done some dirty shit. The Aesir are like squeaky clean, and Loki's the devil. And that kind of understanding doesn't exist in the stories if you read them in any way, shape, or form. Loki is straight chaos. He's not a trickster. He's chaos, and that chaos does what chaos does.
Unpredictability.
That story is what's that?
Unpredictability.
Right. And sometimes that works out in your benefit, and sometimes it doesn't. And when you works out in your benefit, you're like, yay. And when it doesn't, you're like, damn you. My partner, who used to be my apprentice, he's straight Loki, just straight chaos. And he either is doing the most amazing thing you never thought possible, or doing the stupidest fucked up thing you never thought possible. Like he's either walking through the room and everything is just breaks, all the dogs are screaming, cats running across the ceiling. You're like, what the fuck, man? Or he comes in and something you couldn't have possibly figured out, he just did it. You're like, but he's straight chaos. And that is exhibited in the story of
every story.
Utgard Logi. Right. No. The kiss, yeah, that he is. But Utgard Logi is the one where you truly understand what he is. Because in Utgard Logi, they go and they meet the Giant King. And they don't realize it's the Giant King, and they go through a series of little tricks on the way to meet the Giant King. But when they're in his hall, he puts them through a series of tests. And in those tests, Loki has to go against fire, against primal fire, and has to have an eating contest against primal fire, which fire is the sulfur side. That's the chaos side. That's the change. And Loki eats all these trenchers and eats them insanely fast, and looks over, and primal fire.
Trenchers?
Yeah, like back in the day where you'd basically make like a Subway sandwich type thing and fill it with like beef stew or whatever you happen
Beef
to be
stew?
cooking in the stew pot.
I've never filled this up.
It's a thick
stew.
Yeah,
like a
it's
meatball
thick
sandwich.
stew. It's been sitting in that pot for like weeks, just
Okay.
with some cow bones and whatever vegetables they could find, and it's in a nice thickness to it. And you just throw it in the bread, and
Ooh.
the bread sops it up, and you just eat that. and it's called it's a trencher. You know, it's kind of cut out the middle of a baguette type thing.
That's a great fucking idea for a cafe. We could open up a heathen cafe with trenchers all day.
100%. That would be awesome. And then serve like fucking mead that we made. Oh, dude, that would kill it.
Okay, real quick side note. I saw sorry. I saw this fucking bullshit mead at the store. It was sparkling mead, they called it, and it was like they were like made with honey, and they're like, our mead doesn't do well aging over time. And I mean, you mean your fucking champagne? Your fucking bullshit weak sauce bullshit champagne yeast and honey? Get out of here with your bitch ass shit, son. I yelled in the store, and everybody was like, who the fuck is this guy?
Yeah, I've tried them, don't like them at all. There is one here there's two that I've tried that are fairly all right. That Viking blood, that one's pretty good, in a really badass bottle, and it actually tastes pretty good. It still gets you really hungover, things like that, because of the preservatives and the things that they put in there. They put different chemicals in there to clear it up, preserve it, things like that. Where like when I make mead, it's obviously just straight fermented, and the longer it sits, the better it gets, baby. Why you put preservatives? You know, and you know, you can't beat it. And I use real good. I go to the store and get good fruit and good honey.
Yeah,
there's a good mead story in the sagas too about the goat. It's a goat, right? That gives like never-ending supply of mead.
Yeah, with always has mead on tap.
Yeah, and it replenishes itself every night. Goat. And then there's something to it about people that drink of it become scholarly or
that must be yarrow mead
knowledge.
Yeah, well, there's that one's the mead of it's Kvassar. So that's a poet's, the mead of poets.
Oh, the yarrow mead is poet's mead. Is it yarrow?
Yeah, there's some different ones. Before we get too sidetracked though. So Tor in that same story. I'll remember where I was, but now you're asking me to go too far afield. Or in the same story, he gets pitted against this old crone that puts it. Cat just does not fail. Hold on, putting this cat out.
Dude, yeah, like I've had some yarrow mead. My old roommate was a blacksmith, so he would make like super badass hatchets out back, and he would brew mead. And he had this yarrow mead that was like a year old. And I'm telling you, like they call it poet's mead for a reason. We were up all night chanting at the moon. Like it was beautiful. I haven't had mead like that in years. Like gosh, it's so hard to find out here in wine country.
Dude, I will make some up. We've because you don't want to know what's worst about living here on the coast is bees don't like it. So like I go over to bees don't like the foggy. It bothers them. And so I go over to Reading and look at this.
Oh yeah. Ooh, started spilling out, baby. There you go.
It's warm today, so it's solid because it's just pure raw honey.
I love when honey goes crystal. Like, what's up with that? It's like a single source crystalline sweetness, like sugar, like it.
And it's a complex sugar, so it's good for you as opposed to simple sugar. But because of that, it takes quite a bit longer to actually brew good mead. You can do some different processes like feeding it. A few different things to keep the yeast more active longer. As it just takes a lot of time to get the sugar out of that honey because it's a complex sugar. delicious. But it's hard to get good honey like this over here. And then you go over there, and they do have better citrus, I think, over there because it's just way more sunny. But the fruit over there isn't near as good. But so we got to go across the mountains to get honey, which my wife just brought. That's part of what she brought when she pulled up. We were running low. We don't use sugar for much of anything unless it's something that has to caramelize, for cooking, or you need some kind of caramelization that, is for the sugar on the recipe. Other than that, we don't have any use for it. We use honey for everything. It's absolutely fantastic. So anyways, with that understanding that Loki is only chaos, then you start looking at the rest of the tales. Now, Loki, up until the point of where he goes and retrieves Andvari's treasure, that's when Loki basically starts turning more evil shenanigans rather than just shenanigans. And part of this was due to Andvari's treasure. In that was this ring that has the curse of Golvig on it. And this is where the Lord of the Rings tales all come from. Now, this curse of Golvig carries with it the basically spirit of this witch from the first wars of the Aesir and the Vanir. And she was so vile. Before her was the Golden Time, where gold just flowed freely. Nobody cared about it. Well, then this Golvig comes in, and now there's this lust for gold, and there's this greed. And this is so bad that Odin breaks the rules and kills her in Asgard. She was thrice killed, thrice burnt, this one. And she a beast. So her spirit's in this ring, and it gets caught up in Loki. But when Odin gives this to the father of Otter, who Loki had killed, not realizing that it was a shape-shifting dwarf. This dwarf would shape-shift into an otter to go fishing and bring fish home for his family. Then he gives he accidentally kills him, and as repayment, Odin gives him this treasure, which then unleashes the spirit, which re-unleashes Golvig into the world. Well, then Odin kills her again, and they tear her apart, and they leave it to Loki to dispose of her, including her heart. And Loki takes a bite out of it, and from there he's really not a good dude. Once he's got that full nasty Golvig spirit in him. And all this also is well timed with an animosity, because Asgard itself had come to a completion, where there's the story of the giant building the wall around Asgard, and before that you had the different wars, and the Aesir and the Vanir joined together, and then they had the other wars, things like that. Well, they had reached this stability where we're all kind of sitting around partying, having a good time. And that chaos friend, when you're at war, is a really good friend, because when Thor can't just go up and smash something with his hammer, me hit it hard, me pick things up, put them down. When that doesn't work, you need some trickery. You need some chaos. You need somebody to bring something weird. And that was Loki, and that's what he did. Well, when you reach a stability, all of a sudden his irritating antics, like cutting off Sif's hair, rather than just, because when you're out at war, those antics are kind of directed toward your enemy. Now that he's sitting home and bored, now it's antics directed toward you guys. And so it built animosity, where the Aesir were really treating Loki shitty. And this despite Loki being a blood brother of Odin, where Odin, Thor, and Loki and Thor were always welcome at Odin's table. Always. And so that the Aesir, that his tribe was allowed to treat Loki very secondhand and very nasty, and only look, to only look basically the benefits he brought. They're like, who cares anymore? And then they've just focused on the negative. So that's one of the things that I think, again, where Donanaki Dan here was pointing out where you learn the lessons from the gods, is understanding that these friends that you found useful in your needy times, you don't get to decide that you don't like them anymore, and that those things that you were overlooking, because God knows Loki was always irritating, and you were overlooking it when you needed him. But now that you don't really need him, you're just like, yeah, I won't put up with you no more. So you're just kind of a cunt. You're not even a good person. Like, and the seer try to put all the blame on Loki in this situation. And that was already happening, which already, again, built up animosity. Well, then he eats the heart of Golveg, which if there was some kind of just straight evil character in the stories, that would be it. He eats the heart of that, gets cursed with it, blah, blah. And we all know a bunch of us know the rest of the story.
I think you know the rest of the story. I personally know not. I love Loki though. He's always been like my favorite of the Norse gods. I've kind of resonate with that. That there's that level of like irritants that you have to give to your friends and to your circles in order to like keep the spirit alive. It's a pretty important thing. And in our Telegram chats lately, we were talking about flies, and that's one of the really only stories I truly know of Loki is the fly story, where he like turned into a fly and goes and like whispers into people's ears, and
the making of the weapons.
Yes, exactly. Which is like a big old troll story, not an actual troll.
Turns into a gadfly and keeps biting the brother that's running the bellows in his face and in his eyes, and bites him and makes blood run down.
He's fucking up all of Tor's toys. And I was watching this fly the other day, and it's like you guys know this. They do this thing where they like rub their front little hands together.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about? The flies, they sit there and they do that. So they have this like kind of energy, and you're like, what the fuck, dude? Flies are a trip.
Yeah, they look straight like grabblers. They're just little grabblers.
So I was wondering, is there any like reincarnation stories in the Norse mythology? Is there anything about reincarnation?
So from my position, and honestly, this is fairly expressed in the stories. When Balder goes to hell, they send down people to bring him back, and said, hey man, we'd like him back. And furthermore, later after Ragnarok, specifically because Balder was in hell, he doesn't participate in Ragnarok. He returns.
Mm-hmm.
In what shape or form, they don't specify, but he returns. So from my perspective as an alchemist, everything above this carbon plane is etheric. And the higher it gets, the more etheric it is, the more chaotic it is. So the Aesir and the Vanir are basically like, if you liken it to the human body, the cerebrum and the cerebellum. And they are, in opposition. That's why cerebellum and cerebrum sound so close, that bellum is just at war with. So these two are at war with each other. And you had the Aesir Vanir war. And then after the creation up there, and that's going to be your luminaries. Then you turn around and they go to war with the giants, which is your salt crystal side, these big unmovable objects. So that's going to be your like Titan forces, your elemental forces. And as it gets down deeper, it's going to get to be too much for us once again. Now, when we look at the story of that, Balder gets killed, but he never really goes and does too much of anything. He is straight etheric. He's not like Odin, who can travel all 8 paths, has been to all 9 realms. He's all over the damn place doing whatever the hell he wants. He went through the great work. He has access to not just the carbon plane, not just the etheric plane. He has access to the salt plane. He can reach down into the earth and pull out dead things and just start talking to them, right? You know? So he's got access to all the planes. I don't think Balder had access to all the planes. I think Balder was just a straight etheric being. And I think when Balder died, he went to hell where the crystal plane is. And I believe you gain density there. And when Balder went there, there's no suffering and pain like in Christian hell. They actually threw a great feast and there was a huge party. Hey, Balder's here. We all love that guy. You know, right. So I think if you go to build a house, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to have this etheric idea. And then the next thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go get the material for that. So you're going to come up with this idea. And then in order to manifest that, you're going to have to go to the material side, the crystal side, the dense side. And now you're going to have to get what materials you can. And after you're done, here on the carbon plane, we see this awesome house manifest. So he only had that sulfur side. He needed to go down to that hell side so he could gain the density to come here to take the God trial that Odin did. So he's going to be the next Odin. He's going to be here to do what Odin did, because Odin didn't just start out the All-Father. Odin opened up his high mind, his third eye. He took and threw his eye down the well, which is literally the sulfur, like we were talking about at the beginning, going down to the salt. He threw it down the well, opened up that salt mine, went through the entire sacrifice of the ego, which is the alchemical marriage on Yggdrasil. So he flat said, I don't have the wisdom. Yugen and Munin bring me all the knowledge of the world, but I need the wisdom, that salt wisdom, that ancestral wisdom of the world, everything that's ever been here. And so he needed to merge those things, and to merge them, that required a sacrifice of ego. And that was him sacrificing himself to himself. And then he went through the alchemical great work and became the All-Father. So I believe any of us can go through that test. That's what we're here on this plane for. That's what the left-hand path is. The right-hand path wants to follow their savior. The left-hand path is going to be their own damn savior. I'm going to follow Odin and do what Odin did and take the cues Odin left me in the understandings, and I'm going to go follow that path and do what he did and do the alchemical marriage of myself and become something greater than what I am. And I think Balder is here to be the next Odin in the next timeline after Ragnarok, because specifically after Ragnarok, Lef and Lefrasir are left in the mud. These are humans, and the human race is regenerated, and Vidar and Bali and Balder, who didn't participate, and some other gods, all are still here. So Balder reincarnated at some point in time. Again, not sure that he goes back to the same position he was in as an etheric god. I think he then reincarnates on this plane, goes through the great work test that his father did before him, which I think is the secret he whispered in Balder's ear as Balder lay on the funeral pyre before they lit that fucker up. He whispered the secret of fire. He whispered the great work into his ear and said, "Good luck, son."
Wow. I have that's fucking tight. So here's the deal for me. Unfortunately, this is probably my least one of the least well-known canons of like theology that I know at all. Right, like I know the very surface layer, the skin level, the carbon level of like understanding of the Norse mythos, and so. But obviously, I think there's always a reason why you like wait to get into things, because one, it's so damn interesting. Like it's so incredibly interesting and in intrinsic stories that have so much depth and so much poetic goodness tied within each little meaning. Each transformative thing. Like listening to the stories of the of shape shifting. But to me it just makes sense that it's like they're not, maybe weren't physically shape shifting, they were like getting into a trance state, talking to whatever realm, and then like putting that in within their conscious body to have, and then manifesting it there or something like that, because that's kind of what I like to do when I do things too. I like to
with the gods, we got to remember that they weren't of the carbon plane, so they didn't have the carbon body to necessarily stop them.
Yeah. So they're just going to whatever they see fit.
Yeah. So they were able to, some of them did not. Like there's no stories of Thor shape shifting in any way, where he's not a chaotic being that can do that kind of thing. Like Loki's chaos, the oil, you can put the oil in whatever vessel and it'll fill that vessel and take on its basic appearance. The Thor, he does. There's the closest to shape shifting is he dresses up as what they pretend is Freya one time, because a giant stole his hammer, and the required Freya's hand in marriage as back, so he dressed up like supposedly Freya, and of course to a giant that was pretty reasonable. Anyways, he doesn't ever really shape shift in any of the stories because he's more dense and stable. And in fact, there's a story where he tries to go on the Rainbow Bridge and go through the etheric realm, go to the etheric, the more etheric realms on some of them. And Heimdall's like, "Nah, fat ass, you can't do it. You're gonna have to drop off some of your stuff. Yeah.
You have to shed some of that carbon."
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
All right, man. I got one
Absolutely.
question that is ringing before I gotta hop off and go finish, like try to catch the rest of this daylight, finish my shit. But I have this curiosity of when did these when did the heathens and the northern gods meet some of these like other gods? Does that come up in any stories, like any sort of other pagan gods like Vishnu? Is there any crossovers with that, like some sort of multiverse situation? And also maybe sidebar that question and just go with this one. Are the Nords, are they the master miners of the world? Like they have all these beautiful stories of like inner cavernous earth, it's one of the realms, and they were ultimate like alchemists down there, bladesmiths and jewelry makers, and I feel like they were like the master miners of all time.
Dwarves
up there. I just where the minerals are and where they're doing all that work.
Right. The Norns or the dwarves?
I just meant Nords, like northern people. We're just the northern.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely. And then a thing that they did also was they would take and take their ancestors' bones after a funeral pyre. They'd take some pieces that were left and they'd pound that into their weapons, so that way it would carry your ancestor spirit. Well, it also that would carbonate the blade, and So, that's how you make steel. And so their weapons were a little higher quality than most, because they were literally pounding carbon and making it a high quality steel alloy instead of just basic iron or bronze or things that other people of that day and age used more often.
With the bones,
But
with burnt bones of their ancestors.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, that's fucking super tight. Wow. Strength.
You bet.
Strength and wisdom in your goodness there, man. Well, shit.
And that's not that odd. I mean, a lot of people want to oh, well, that's a pagan practice. Well, you know that for a Catholic altar to be holy, it has to have a reliquary, and a reliquary is a bone of a saint. Somebody has been risen to sainthood. So in all of these big Catholic churches, there's a little hidden niche in the back, and it's got the bone of some dead saint in there.
I think all mystic, like any mystic theology, once you start to dig into the esoteric side of things, like body parts become very important. Fluids, bones, skulls, hair, they all play a very important role. But like on the exoteric level of like the surface layer of especially in modern understanding of religion or whatever, huge quote marks for the audio audience out there, but yeah, it's like that's why when you start to look at things like even like secret societies, skull and bones, like why do they worship the skull? It's because it's very ancient to worship the bones of the wise ones, of the people who had certain valor, because those bones emanated the energy, and thus you could I almost syncretically can capture that energy and have it within your field, your energy field. So I mean, like, it makes sense to me.
The bones are full of salts, and the salt crystals give off a radiation signature. All crystals give off a radiation. That's part of how you can tell, like, whether a sapphire is a sapphire or some dickhead just made it. Is you take you take a radiation and you go over there and check it. Moldavite gives off mad radiation. They all give off a radiation signature. In those bones is your salts, and your salts is where your ancestral, like we've been talking about, your ancestral wisdom, and that's in your salts. And so to keep that next to you and have that available, that vibration available for you, and they're mixing with yours, you're literally helping operate off ancestral wisdom. And if it's not your ancestor, even just as you said, some great man that you would choose to be like, to learn from, things like that, you could start sharing in his ancestral energy, his wisdom, by being close to those things.
Okay, so that leads me to my real final question here. So I do have it in my notes, but I was just choosing which one to do, and I guess this leads into it because we're talking about mining, and then that brought us to this. And so this keeps being brought up, right? The energy within the crystals, or the energy within the salt, the spirit within the salt, or the spirit trapped in these crystals. So what are the stories and the Nordic mythos, or the Nordic religion? I don't know what am I supposed to fucking say when I say this? Do I say heathenry? Do I say Nordic? I don't know what to say.
Yeah, because Norse. Is that honestly what most people would fall back to eventually? Norse is really popular right now, but it's actually Germanic, and then it's Germanic tribal, and it's typically then an expansion out from there. And they were all basically tribally Germanic until you get up to like the more pagan areas where you had the Teutons and things, or the Gauls and things like that. Before that, and you can look at that through the Germania and the Caesar's stories and things like that, where they ran into the Germanics, and they're like, and they didn't even get very far in Germany. What little bit they did conquer ever, they're like, yeah, don't fuck with these people.
They're super mystic, man. Like, yeah, like I do know a little bit about like mystic, like Germanic mysticism and ancient Germanic stuff. It's fascinating and incredibly deep. Like it's so dense. You can only get like every couple pages of reading stuff like that, you're just like mind blown. Is so dense, compared to like some of the Western esotericism, which is like, I can get through those books, bro. Like I can, but some of this other stuff where you're just like, it's like heavily coded. Anywho, point I was getting at is I've been looking into the mirror stuff and the ancient understanding of the crossover between these different cultures of spirits being trapped in the mirrors, or the reflective surfaces, really, right? Water and hydromancy and stuff like that. So I'm getting a lot of those vibes here with the salt and the crystals. And I'm wondering if there are any specific stories of either like big crystals or rocks. I know there's stone giants. I do know that. But like, what about portals using some sort of divinatory process for non-etheric beings? Humans, or like the interaction, the crossover between humans and gods, and just I guess just the concept of mirrors and Norse and ancient Germanic mysticism here, Sir Balderson.
I've never seen a mirror mentioned. There is definitely crystals and rocks, a lot of that. You know what a mirror is, right?
I mean, it's it's shiny obsidian. The original mirror was a polished piece of obsidian, volcanic glass, and then it got morphed into liquid mercury.
What the made mirror is, it's mercury.
Yeah.
And what's mercury do?
It's a messenger of the gods. It's
the transition between two levels. Mercury can make that transition. So that fire, that sulfur and that salt don't do any good without the oil to open them up and make it so that transition can happen.
And the oil is consciousness.
Yes, that's your literal, your mercury, and that makes that transition possible. Your thought process is going to be your sulfur, and then your ancestral salts, and the mercury is making the transition between the two things possible. Something you can't just have a hot wire in a ground and you can hold them both like this and nothing will happen. There's no mercury making the transition possible. That's why mercury is also responsible for exchange, transactions, anything like that, because that transition needs to happen through the mercury. And that's what the mirror is. So they aren't trapped in the mirror. It's through the mirror. They're looking into another dimension. They're looking into the more etheric dimension. This thing's vibrating too high for a person on this level normally to deal with. And they're looking through the mercury. And that's why why Neo, he has to go through the mercury in order to make the transition. It's always through mercury, and that mirror is and that it is symbolic of that. It's also the fluid in the scrying bowl. That's going to be mercury a lot of times when you're getting really into it. And through that, again, you're basically contacting the etheric realm, where your mind can just expand out and just see things, and your body doesn't have to be there. When you understand that. Well, this is a tool for those that can't do that kind of thing. Like, basically you're having an out of body experience through this bowl. You still can't affect what you're seeing. The same as like you were having an out of body experience and your sulfur side just flew over there. And so you're just seeing a transition through that.
Do you know what the mineral makeup of obsidian is? I'm wondering, because when I was looking into it, ancient Mesoamerica and China would use obsidian for the early mirrors and scrying mirrors and divination stuff. So I'm wondering, I know there's obviously a lot of sulfur in it because that's the quick and easy thing from volcanic gases.
Volcanic. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it has high mercury content as well.
It's mostly silica. Just off the top of my head.
I've always wondered if they've some of these old like pieces of technology, antiquated technology and stuff. I wonder if they would dip them into like a mercurial substance to kind of add that mercury to it. Would they douse it with it or something? I've been wondering about that lately.
Yeah,
Interesting.
there's always some kind of a bowl too, like in the sacrifice area. There's always a bowl of some kind. I know they used obsidian a lot of times for like, they say that obsidian knife can be like something like 100 times sharper than a scalpel. That,
Dude.
Yeah, they say that obsidian made scalpels, and this is part of why they can do those surgeries in some of these third world countries. And you see them like flay the person's arm open, and the person's just like sitting there, and they're like, we just did that without drugs, you know. Well, right, you're part of the reason for that is they're using an obsidian blade, and obsidian blade is so fine it either cleanly severs through the nerve tissue, or it's able to slide between them. So it's one or the other. So it's such a clean slice. It's like having a paper cut where you can't even feel the, and it's not till it starts getting spread out and stuff, then you feel it. But right at first, like what just happened, and all of a sudden you see, or you get yourself with a super, super sharp knife, and then you pull your hand into a fist, and all of a sudden it just pops open. You're like, ah!
And as above, so below. So if obsidian is sharp on the physical plane, it must be sharp on the conscious plane as well. Maybe that's why it had that quality of being able to like sharply, cut through or be in tune or what have you. Goodness, man, this is so goddamn good. I wish I didn't have to spray my plants, but we will talk again. I know that's for sure. I love you too, man. Dan, hold it down, brother, and I'll see you soon.
You know it.
You got that alpaca shit fermented yet?
Oh yeah, I did that. I did that tea a while ago, man. I now just need more. More. I need more poop from you, dude.
Exactly.
Oh,
good stuff.
I was listening to the Proseda, and there's a story about Thor who comes in contact with a giant named Skrymir. And I was wondering do you think that maybe that's a story about Ymir, because he hits the giant on the forehead with his hammer to get his food wallet back, and his name is fucking Skrymir.
Fascinating question. I wish Romy, I don't know if he's gone or not, but that's a fascinating question, because that is the giant king, and he's somehow appearing to only be a normal sized man. And so when they get, that is the story of Utgard Loki.
Yeah.
And when they get there, and right. And when they get there, then and they still don't even realize it's the giant king when they get there. They realize it's giants, but they don't realize he's the giant king. And it's not until they get back to Asgard. And this is one of the parts where you find out truly that Odin in and of himself is not really at war with the giants, because they get back to Asgard, and Odin's sitting there with this same giant king, and they're laughing their asses off about the escapades that Thor and Loki had just been through, and the different tricks that he had played on them. Like the one you're talking about, where the giant king's pretending to snore so loud that Thor can't stand it, and so he tries to wake him up, and then he ends up hitting him in the head with Mjolnir, and the giant each time just sits up, and he's like, "Oh, I did an acorn fall on my head?
Did a leaf hit me?
Yeah, did a leaf blow against me?" And then he admits to Thor later that after they're back in Asgard, that he had struck the earth so hard, and that he had been under some type of a visual trick, because he had struck the earth, and he did it with such force that he created mountain ranges. Yeah, and that the Giants were surely scared then. As the
Yeah.
dude just made a whole mountain range. He's so pissy. So that's fascinating. I had not put that together. That could have just been something that he was seeing in his mind the entire time, that this person was never there, and that he was doing that through some tool such as a scrying bowl or a mirror or something, in order to give him the ability to almost enter Thor and Loki's head.
Yeah.
And there was a human boy with him also, who ended up being representative of thought. And he's the boy that breaks one of Thor's goat's legs. And
what's his name? Like
after they'd eaten it,
Thormir, or I forget his name. The kid.
I'm having trouble pulling that one up out of my memory quick. But
yeah, I heard that Skrymir name, and
I put them under some type of enchantment. I agree. That's a fascinating.
Yeah.
I like it.
Because in the mythologies they use a lot of like this kind of like hidden messaging. It's there for you to use your brain to think about it, so you can develop brain power, in my opinion, instead of just going through life not even paying attention to anything. They're trying to give you some knowledge, but you have to actually contemplate it yourself to kind of really figure it out.
And if the end result is being something that's more human than human, something that's greater than the rest of us, would you just give somebody that, or would you only want the ones who truly understood, who truly went through the trials and gained the knowledge and things like that to have access to that? Or would you want any jackass that, opened up a Willy Wonka chocolate bar to, have access to it?
I agree. Yeah. I feel the same way with the show. It's like, I don't want to be super huge or popular. I just want the people that want to hear this stuff come find it. I don't want it all mass everywhere, or be like fucking Joe Rogan or any of those guys. I'd rather just have people that are actually seeking the knowledge come listen to the show and find it here, But
100% feel the same with my crowd. Mine's not huge, even though I associate with a lot of the really big people and have been around for a while. My crowd's still not huge, but I feel like the quality of people, if you don't have some thinking power, you're not following me,
Right.
So I feel like the quality of the people following me is fantastic.
Exactly. And then our last conversation was with Raven Wolfson, and he told us that Snorri Sturluson, whatever, was just a Catholic monk. And when I was listening to some of the other books and even reading one of them, it says it in like the beginning of the prologues of all of them that, like, Snorri Sturluson was just some Catholic monk who translated everything. So and then that kind of goes into the fact that maybe they're putting some Christianity into it.
Well, that I'm not going to deny that Sturluson was a monk at all, but that he's just a Catholic monk, that's really also just going the other way with it and closing your mind the other direction also. He was also a tribal leader, an extraordinarily well-respected tribal leader.
Mm-hmm.
And back then, very often the tribal leader also was a religious figure, even in Christianity, where the king was usually also a lot of times the church had to ordain them and things like that. Mm-hmm. So to be a religious type figure and the lead, a king or a leader, that was normal, and especially after the conversion to Christianity. So it's not like he didn't have the qualifications behind him, which again isn't me arguing that there wasn't Christianization put into it. Mm-hmm. Definitely not arguing that. But to just like pretend like that guy wasn't a tribal leader and wasn't an actual heathen and didn't just live in the time after the conversion, because it's not like that dude did the converting. You know,
Yeah.
Snorri Sturluson didn't run around putting anybody up on a cross and telling them that they needed to give up the old ways or anything. That guy is post conversion, not his fault.
So do you think that like the Norse mythology that we have now was influenced by Christianity and that spin was put on it? Or do you think that it's the opposite way around and that the Norse mythology actually inspired a lot of the biblical stuff?
I would say that the New Testament has a lot of Norse inspiration in it.
Yeah.
The New Testament has a lot of Norse inspiration. And I think that they did that 100%, because if you look at the Christian holidays, take Christmas. It doesn't make sense that a baby would even be born north of the equator at in the dead of winter. Like that is not the time that that kind of thing happens. Now what does happen is that the sun dies for 3 days and then returns and is reborn. And so then you flip around and you look at Easter, and Easter's represented with eggs and a rabbit and
fertility.
all these things. Right, fertility symbols, where it's new birth instead of rebirth. And it's they've planted in. The thing is about most poor people, and this is something that Alexander the Great first figured out, that poor people, as long as you let them keep the same holidays, for the most part, they're cool with it. Like, oh, I still get Christmas off. Oh, you're calling it Shmutsha now? Oh, happy Shmutsha. You know, and they don't really care. And as long as they can pretty much keep the same practices, you know, and keep doing the same basic things, nobody really cares. So they were able to make these conversions into these other, into Christianity, where the Roman Catholics started coming in and pushing Christianity. As long as we're still doing the same basic things, the same party days or the same party days, we're going to put in some of your symbology. You can still do the same activities. We're just going to call it Jesus Day now. Okay. Jesus. Oh yeah. Jesus. Sure. Whatever. Shit. You know,
when I was listening to the Balder story, I was like, fuck, this sounds a lot like Jesus right here. Do you think like the whole Balder story was the like precursor to the Jesus story?
I 100% do that. That he's supposed to be the next Odin, and that Jesus didn't do that, so they made it into something else. Although I also will admit, if you do a lot of study, and I do more study than just the Eddas and things like that, Balder is the Balder story is one of the more controversial. So that's really the story. If somebody's going to take a poop on the Eddas, the Balder story is where they're going to go ahead and sit. That's the place they're going to park. And part of that is because there's a few other versions, and depending on where you were culturally. In one of the versions, Balder is a human son, and his horse falls down and breaks a leg. Odin does a spell to try and to fix the leg, which he does. And that's one, and that one's a really well-known spell. So this is a folklore that's heavily followed in Northern Europe. And he ends up getting killed in a squabble over Freya. And I don't believe her name's Freya even. It's a squabble over a woman. He ends up dying. And another one, and then in another version, he's still more of a godlike being, but still gets in a squabble over Freya and gets killed. So that one's one of the ones where they try and since he was post Christianity, one of the ones where they try to say then that he Christianized that and put that into there. Although the areas like the Saxo Grammatica, where you have some of these other stories, they aren't Norway. So, and they're in a different area. So that's also discounting that the different areas do have different tales, different accountings. During the Germanic times, there was even one tribe that didn't truly follow Odin at all, and they actually worship the sun. And then you even have like we're going to get I'm going to be on and we're going to revisit the Bach saga, and according to Ior Bach, Odin is the sun. So which doesn't match, and that's Finnish, which doesn't match any of these other tales where like in Norse specifically with the Eddas, you end up where Sol is the sun and Mani is the moon, and the sun is feminine and the moon is masculine, which that does also lend some credence to that he wasn't really Christianizing it, because the Christianization really brought that masculine sun. You can see post-Christianization that a lot of stories have the masculine sun. Pre-Christianization of the general world, or Abrahamic, get down off there, or the Abrahamic anyways, the sun is feminine. Like your Native American cultures, your First Nation people from Canada, original Egyptian, even though they've morphed that into the sun is masculine now. The original story is Osiris is the moon, and this doesn't say this directly, but Isis is the sun, and in his death, Osiris's death, he gets cut into 14 pieces, which is the waning moon, where the 14 days of the waning moon, and then she puts him back together with the 14 pieces, and that's the 14 days of the waxing moon, except for his penis, which she uses to impregnate herself over and over again, which that's part of when I talk about the biochemical universe. When I talk about the interactions between the sun and the moon, and I say that the moon impregnates the sun, it's right there in that story that she takes his penis and impregnates herself over and over. So
and that's how they get.
Anyways,
that's how they get Horus. Yeah, but that Balder story is super fascinating to me. Even do you think that it connects even into Baal?
No,
you think they're totally different?
No. Yeah.
Because
I don't think I mean, I understand that the Baal is so, and this is one of the things that gets confused, and I don't know why this is today, but almost everybody wants to put Latin which is Mediterranean, as the root language of the world, basically, or of English and everything else, and it's simply not true. This is part of what I find fascinating with Ior Bach, where he talks about the roots being different things. English language is actually primarily Germanic. And that's part of why, like, if I do Germanic things, it's, hear Germanic things, like there's actually a program out of Norway or Iceland called Ragnarok. Pretty neat little program, but it's in a more Germanic language. And to me, there's times that I'd be looking down and I'd realize that I just totally understood everything they said without even watching the subtitles or anything. It just made complete sense to me. The more Latin, Babylonian based languages, I don't get it all. The Spanish doesn't make no damn sense to me.
Because you have the Baltic Sea, which is up there also, which has the name Ball in it.
Mediterranean.
No, up
Yeah.
in the north, you have the Baltic.
Oh.
Right, that's the sea that surrounds like Sweden and Finland. Yeah. And so I was just curious because why would they name the sea Ball if it didn't have anything to do with Baldur's of Balder, not Balderson. But you have like these connections with the words, and he was really loved, and we know that the Christian they just kind of demonized anything that was heathen or pagan, and just flipped it on its end. And when you look at like, so how Balder was loved and respected, and then even the story where he goes down to hell, he gets stuck in hell, he can't get out, and then his spirit goes, is all reminiscent of the Jesus story. Even like the fact that Loki has to take an arrow and shoot it through the mistletoe because that's the only thing on the planet that he didn't that they didn't tell was something was going to happen to Balder. How does that go?
It's the only thing. It's the only thing that didn't agree to not kill Balder.
Yeah, because they forgot to tell it. And so Loki shoots the arrow through the mistletoe and then kills him. And then you even have the mistletoe at Christmas time. And so it's very interesting because it does connect to the whole Jesus thing. And then so it just seemed like maybe it might connect to like older gods as well, especially like Baal, because it's so prevalent everywhere.
I just looked it up. Old Norse Baal is baller.
Is it?
Yeah. That's interesting. That's fascinating. That's a good connection. Yeah, I wouldn't have made that connection at all myself.
Well, if you look at the Bach saga, the Baal god, he's the one that eats the babies or something like that. And we know from like the Bach saga what the eating of the babies is really about. It's not really necessarily that he's eating children, but he's consuming his own seed. So it's a whole different thing. But they flip everything to make it seem a lot worse, so you stay away from it basically, so you don't practice it. So
right. Well, yeah. And it's amazing because I actually just had a fight with a Christian that tried to get me thrown off the Flattoberfest and said a bunch of lies. And him and I got into it, and I was like, and this is one of my points. Well, you can read the Eddas, you can read 20 different books. The Havamal, the Saxon Grammatica, all kinds of different regional. None of them contain details in how to commit a sacrifice of an animal. Yeah. None of them never give details on how to sacrifice a human. The only sacrifice in the story is Odin of himself to himself by his own choice. And it gives no details for sacrificing anything else at all.
Or personal sacrifice, though, too, right?
Right. It's a personal thing.
Or chosen, or people were voluntarily offered themselves up as a sacrifice. Didn't that happen also?
I don't think that happened.
Okay.
Find it to me. Read any of the texts and find me where it says that happened. That needs to happen. That would be a happy thing for the gods. That going and getting yourself, taking one of your prime warriors and gutting him would be a better thing before battle. That would make the gods happy. It's not in our texts.
I saw
in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I just saw it in the show Vikings. They had that scene where they all ate mushrooms, and then one guy volunteered himself to get sacrificed. So I was just curious if maybe that was something that they did also. But But yeah,
I don't believe that. This is the thing, and you're gonna probably everybody else you invite on is gonna fully agree with this, and you're gonna have a completely agreeing conversation. For me, let's start out with that. Most archaeologists, and that's where these stories come from, is archaeologists. You know, no, they're mostly Christian and they're mostly dipshits. And Christians, for some reason, always, whatever they do, they project onto you. And so their book is full of animals you need to sacrifice, how you need to sacrifice them, what kind of things you need to do to make them suitable for sacrifice.
You want to talk about blood
Lots
sacrifice?
of sacrifice.
Yeah. Even in the sacrament, you're drinking blood.
Yep. You're drinking the blood of Christ. He died to save you. He didn't sacrifice himself for higher knowledge and understanding. He died for you, you know, so he's a real sacrifice. Odin wasn't a sacrifice for me. So their book's full of it. And well, now let's put ourselves into Old Norse times, and you're an archaeologist that just found a pit of bones. What's the archaeologist's answer?
Sacrifice.
This is a sacrifice pit.
Yeah.
Right. Now let's go ahead and put ourselves in the lives of the Old Norse. They didn't have refrigeration. Any food that they
just buried it in the ground. There was snow everywhere.
Well, during the wintertime, absolutely, but not during the summertime when it's nice, you know, like anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so now you can't keep your food. So what do you do? And on top of that, let's take into account that once a week they would have bloats. And a bloat is where you and the other farmers from around all meet up at the Great Hall. Everybody brings food. It's a potluck. Only one person's going to bring an animal to kill to the potluck. And then you're going to basically, or maybe a couple goats, depending on your village or something, but you're not going to just go slaughtering a bunch of animals. You're going to do enough to everybody to eat and then take home some for the week. Because, you know, for a couple days, that meat's going to be good. You throw it in a stew pot. It's good all week, whatever. Well, what are you going to do with the bones? Are you going to just willy-nilly spread them all over the place? Or are you going to get a fucking pit and put them in the garbage pit, you jackasses? You know?
Yeah.
It's just for sacrifices. It's a garbage pit.
I wanted to bring up another story that I thought was interesting, and I haven't really heard much about it before, but with the Bach saga, you know, they talk about hell or Helsinki being burned down in 1050 AD, and there's a story that Freyr gives a prediction to the fall of Asgard and the burning of Odin's hall to Odin. And I was wondering if you know that story, and what time period do you think that happened in?
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, the Bach saga is so fascinating too, because one of the really interesting things is then you would actually go down in Helsinki to get down to Asgard, not up, down.
Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating. Yeah, that's got to be. No idea.
Have you heard that story before, though?
The story of Frey?
Yeah, Freyr. It's Freyr.
Yeah, and part of that is that
so it's she. Yeah, she gives the prediction.
Oh, Freya. Yeah. No, I had not heard that. Which story is that? Do you know?
I don't know. I was just listening to this book today and I heard it in there. And I was like, oh, I'd never heard that before. And me and Andy have been trying to find if there's any kind of talk of, you know, in history of something being burned down in Asgard or whatnot. So when this kind of popped up, I went, holy shit. Well, there it is right there in the Norse mythology.
Asgard definitely burned. In the end, Asgard definitely burned.
Oh, and
definitely.
Last Ragnarok the second, the third.
Yeah.
Oh, it does.
in every Ragnarok, I think it burns. Because when you look at the story of Ragnarok, the first thing that happens is the army of Muspelheim come, and the fire giants are astride these giant, horses, and the Surt and his armies drive through the 9 worlds and burn them all to ash. Then on the flip side, the armies in Niflheim are coming on the Naglfar ship, and so then the fire meets the water washes back over, which these wouldn't be a water ship, it'd be ice, these are the ice giants, and that washes back over where the two meet because it turns to water, and then the world comes back green and fruitful after a time where it had not been.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Another story that I heard was Freya disguises herself as a woman named Hyther, and Hyther means bright, but it sounds a lot like Hathor.
Yeah, it does.
and she goes on and pretends that she's goddesses of other places. I think that's what it says.
Weird. Because Hathor should be the sun, and the horns of Hathor are the sun's rays. But again, I can't deny that what you're saying, that's really close, and she would be a very nature type goddess, although she's more from the she is an etheric being. Like I said, Vanir and Asir and Vanir would be cerebrum, cerebellum, sun and moon. She'd be more from the moon side than the sun side. That's freaking interesting as hell. Maybe she's trying to make a growth also, because she doesn't participate in Ragnarok. That's fascinating.
Interesting. So this last one is just from our studies with Atlantis and Lemuria. I keep on hearing Mu fucking everywhere in words, like in Sumeria and everything. And there seems to be this weird connection to Sumeria and Enki and all this other shit, right? And today they're talking about the opposite of Asgard is Muspelheim, and there's fucking Mu right there. And if Asgard's at the north, then Muspelheim would be at the bottom because it's the opposite. Well, this is like in a round earth.
Niflheim is the opposite of Muspelheim. Niflheim's the opposite of Muspelheim.
Okay. Even still.
So right. Asgard is actually on the Muspelheim side of things. So they're very etheric, more fiery, and so it's more on the moose. But I do agree with it's
the fire and the ice, though.
Yeah, it is fire and ice.
And then even Terra del Fuego, which is what Antarctica used to be called, is the land of fire. So you have Muspelheim being the land of fire, and then Niflheim could have been the land of mist or ice, cold weather, which would be the colder climate in the north, if you go with like a globe mythology based on that. But I just found it super interesting that Mu was right there again. And it just made my brain go, oh shit, this is like it's
have you
it's all here.
Have you listened to Santos Bonacci's percussive sound series?
No, I have not.
You might want to check that out. I think you might find that pretty fascinating with the line of questions you're asking. I think you might find that pretty fascinating. Okay. Yeah, man. Because he ties a lot of these things together according to the basic sounds like that.
Yeah. I've watched some of his videos and whatnot, and heard him on shows and stuff. And I mean, to be honest, for me, he gets some stuff right and some stuff I think he's kind of wrong about based on my own opinions. Doesn't, I'm not saying like he's just wrong. I could be wrong for all I know, but when I start putting things together, though, like they start to fit in these other ways too. But no, I agree with a lot of the things that he does talk about, especially the like toroidal field stuff and everything like that. And I used to listen to him a lot when he talked about myths and the different words, connections, and stuff like that. Another thing, since you're a weaving spider, is the Norns, man, the fates. I just heard this recently about the three Norns and the fates, and I thought it was very interesting because there's like another name for him that's like the Matha Trace or the Madra Trace or something like that, like the three women. And it sounds a lot like Martyr or Mary or the three Marys. And then even in the Jesus story, you have the three Marys too, right? You have Mary, his mother, Mary, the hooker one, the whore.
Magdalene.
Yeah. And then you have the other Mary, which is like his they don't even really know who she is. She's like maybe his mother's sister or something or whatever. But anyways, it's still three Marys that come to him after he's crucified on the cross. So it almost symbolizes like the three fates are coming to visit him and determining his fate. Can you get into like
and on the Gnostic end, supposedly they sing him back, to bring him back or resurrect him or do whatever, they sing to him.
Yeah, they're the ones that take him down, right? Can you get into like the Norse mythology of the Norns though? Because they're the spiders, they're the weavers.
And so it's future, past, and present.
Mm-hmm.
And one's doling the thread out, one's weaving the thread in, and one's cutting the thread. And so this is a very personal subject. From my point of view, and this is a very freeing thing. The day you die is decided. Nothing you do and nothing else is going to change that. The day you die, that's already been decided. And the conditions you were born into almost set a backdrop that you can't deny. You know, if you were playing them little card games like my kids do, field magic, where it sets like a general overlay that there's no denying. The thing that you get to do and choose, and that the Norns don't control, is how you fit into that. You're controlling that part. They might be weaving the thread, but you're the one that's choosing. One way to look at it is, you know, if I realized I was going to die Tuesday of next year, there's a whole lot of different ways I could die Tuesday of next year. I could be a hero in a story, like say we're at war and there's a buildup, and I decide that I'm going to go and I'm going to, you know, I don't really believe in the whole World War II narrative, but I'm just using this as an example because most people get it. You know, I'm going to go back and I'm going to assassinate Adolf Hitler. And, you know, because I decide that, you know, that's the day I'm going to die, you know, and we're in World War II, I'm going to go do this massively great thing. You could also end up being somebody that dies, gets killed attempting to murder Adolf Hitler, and now you're a martyr. You could be the person that kills 3 innocent office people on the way in to kill Hitler, and now you're just some raving psycho murderer. There's a whole lot of different ways that you could weave that thread into the tapestry. And so Odin, when he was told his fate, that he was definitely going to die at Ragnarok. Odin spent all that time knowing he wouldn't live through that. He made his own hall where the best warriors of the world all went into like a super shock troop training. He went around and set up all kinds of moving pieces just for that day. He was in preparation for that. And Odin chose on that day, knowing he was going to die, that these forces that were destroying the world that he had built and the things that he had loved, they're coming with it. And that's a choice. He could have just walked quietly to his death, but he said, no, I see what's going on here, and you guys are coming with me. And made sure that those forces against also didn't take control of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I had a couple other notes here, but I think we kind of browsed over the different realms. Do you think that the realms are actual places on the planet, or do you think that they were etherical? Because kind of like the way I think is like maybe there was 9 bodies of land, and these were the 9 different realms, the different places where they could go, and they were able to somehow travel to these different areas through underground passageways, and that's what the Bifrost Bridge was, and that's how they were able to get to them, and not necessarily an etherical type of setting, but you have like the land of the dwarves, and you have the dark elves, and it all seems to have context to even people in the lands that it's referring to. So what's your take on that?
So when we look at that story, some of it's etheric, and some of it though is then underground, like you said, in crystal. Mm-hmm. When we look at the Rainbow Bridge, and especially in the context of living in the North, the rainbows happen in the air. And then in the North, a lot of times when you get moisture in the air, it will freeze up, and we get these dogs and we get these rainbows that happen. But that's a very in the air etheric thing. And so that's only some of them, because we live on Midgard. Midgard also is going to include below us. So there's then absolutely realms where there's then the dwarves. And when we think about the dwarves, these are in caves, working with the base metals, mining things out. They're obviously in the earth. And there's also then going to be levels to each of those things. So when we look at it, Asgard and is going to be just above us, and they kind of are able to interact with us quite a bit. Well, then when you get clear up to Elfheim, the elves don't really interact with us, and you don't see a lot of stories of the elves interacting, and they're not even really in the stories too much. That their existence isn't really denied, but you don't really see that. And then when you get up to the highest level, there is an eagle that stops you from going any higher. Muspelheim is not available to us. And the same thing applies on the bottom end, because on the bottom end is the it's not an eagle, it's a dragon. It's called the I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's a dragon on the bottom side of this, where the roots of the world are going, and it's gnawing at the roots of the world, and we can't go below that.
Interesting.
Right. So again, that gives you the cosmic egg idea that below us there's above us there's a firmament, and below us there's a firmament. There's an area above and below where we are only accessing this middle ground.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It goes into the whole Vesca Pisces thing too, and even like the spirit. I don't know if you ever watched Spirit Science, that little stupid cartoon on YouTube, but they talk about how one can't like create a whole world. It has to split itself into two. So then once it splits itself into two, you get the Vesca Pisces, and then once that split happens, then it splits again, and then you get the tree of life after that, and then it splits again, and then you get more and more, and then until you end up with the whole tree of life. Actually, I think it's not the tree of life first. It's like the egg or something. I think
seed.
The seed. Yeah.
It's like the seed, and then the flower of life.
Yeah, the flower
of life.
Fruit. Yes.
Yeah.
And then once the fruit happens, then everything is populated, right? So.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a fascinating idea too. Yeah, I don't know what to make of anything anymore. The more I think of things, the more confused I just get.
That happens for a while, and part of that's just that you've taken in a whole lot of information that you're trying to assimilate. And part of the problem that we have today is that we don't assimilate these things into our lives. We don't start living and understanding, because that's where there's a lot of talk about the shadow side. What the shadow side is the material side, where you start living these high ideas. You start actually giving them life and material. And that's one of the things that we don't do. We all go to the next big idea, and well, I had this last understanding, but it didn't do anything for me, so now I need another understanding, instead of actually living out these understandings. Now, what you're going to find when you start doing things like going into the lab and doing the lab work and start applying these things, some of them don't work. And that's where you're going to get that's why in the cycle, the seed is perfect, and it goes down into this dirty material, but it's after that it gets weighed and measured, because you can't weigh and measure an idea. You need it to become material in order to weigh and measure it. And so that idea needs to be lived out in order for us to understand whether it was a good idea or not. It might sound like a good idea, but not be a good idea. And even if it is a good idea, it might need some tweaking. That's where the whole weigh and measuring process comes in after it has become material and manifest. So the way that you start wading through that is living those things out. For me personally, anyways, I do all my weighing and measuring in the lab. If I can't make this happen naturally in nature, if I can't reproduce what I'm talking about, then I'm probably full of shit.
Yeah. Agree. I've been listening to you read the Have Mall with Rachel, and that's been entertaining.
Thank you.
It's very like, it's refreshing to hear like Norse mythology and see how like good it was and not all savagery, and the idea of hospitality, especially in Norse mythology. It seems very permeating into the world, except we don't see it as being a Norse concept. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't see that idea as being from the North, because why would heathens be hospitable? This Christianized world. So it's really cool to hear.
The nice ones, right?
Yeah, they're sweethearts. Love them.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed how their book has a lot of hospitality in it. Oh no, their book has how to kill things and murder them. That's right. That's how that went.
Yeah. Well, they killed all the giants. Instead of learning from them, they just
Well,
slaughtered them.
they do kill the giants.
Yeah, man. And I just recently got a whole bunch of saga books, Edda's up the wazoo.
Nice.
Because I was like, why don't I have very many? I need to go get some. Like I keep, mostly because me and Andy and I are doing this Bach research. I wanted to try to go into the sagas and try to find what I could find to, corroborate or break down the saga in a way, so I could, just put it to the test. And
you bet.
I've been reading some of these stories to my son, which he's like, "Oh, Dad, don't read." I'm like, "No, I'm reading it to you, dude, because I'm gonna read it out loud, and I'm gonna hear it, and you're gonna hear it, and we're just gonna sit here and listen." And then I'm reading at the same time, and so I'll ask him like, "How'd you like that one?" And he'll be like, "Oh, that one was really good. That was really cool. You got any more?" And then because I was like, "You should read one of these." He's like, "No way, I'm not reading that." And so after I read to him, he went and picked up some of them and was like looking at them and looking through them. And I was like, "There we go."
I think there are a lot more vibrant stories than most cultures. They're just damn fun.
They are fun, but they have, like I was referring to before, they have that morality in it of,
Yeah.
all these stories, like even at the end of the stories, they go, when Thor tries to pick up the cat and he can't get the cat off the ground and he's so strong and he gets like 3 tries to pick up the cat and he only gets 1 paw off. And then at the very, and that's just one of the trials. And then at the very end, they go, "Oh, well, here's why, because this is what it represents." And it's giving you, it's telling you like, this is what it represents. This is the story. This is why you can't do it, because you can't control everything that there is. You don't have power over everything. You're just a human. It's humbling.
Yeah.
It's to show you that you're just a part of the whole piece. You're not any more powerful than Thor, who is a god.
Yeah.
And he can't do it.
Yeah. You bet, because there's primal forces that was above and below them. I said in that same story, Loki can't defeat the primal fire in that same story. And then the child races thought and can't, thought's the fastest thing ever.
Yeah.
You bet.
Yeah, those are good stories.
It's absolutely. Well, and like you said, they're and on so many levels. Even if you don't have whether it's exoteric or esoteric, they're just good moral stories. And then when you start getting into the deep esoterics, the things that you can pull out of those stories is just endless. The understandings that you can pull out, they are straight onions. I mean, I understand that all esoteric books are onions, and they have the exoteric levels and the esoteric levels, but I don't think any of them have the depth to it that the heathen stories do. But it's a very old culture, and I also can't state for like the Asian cultures, some of them, although I find it very interesting. And this one of the things that Romy was asking about, they don't talk about other gods from other cultures but they do have stories where the Huns are part of our culture, and there's actually heroes that are Huns in the story. Yeah. There's a lot of intermixing.
From other cultures, they go on the hunt also.
The Huns, the
Huns.
There's Huns in our stories. So that's fascinating. They don't talk about other gods, and I don't know if some of the Huns followed heathen gods, but there are stories that have Huns in them, and the Huns are the heroes even in the stories. We're friends with them.
Yeah. I don't know how to really word this or ask it as a question, but there's the city of Tyre, Tyre, which I believe is in Lebanon. It looks awful like Tyr. And don't they say
It does.
in Norse mythology that Tyr comes from another land? He's not actually part of the pantheon. He like comes to them later.
Well, there's a lot of speculation that puts Tyr as the original sky god. And that Tyr was worshipped long before Odin. And actually, there's quite a bit that shows that Thor was even worshipped prior to Odin.
How is that possible? Because Thorin is like the son of Odin.
That's only in some stories. Again, there's some real. We're talking about something that was thousands of years ago. 1,000 years ago when the Christianization had happened. So for 1,000 years that these stories have been degrading, so, and then depending on the area you're from, some of them, not all of them. And actually, if you listen to Manly P. Hall talks about Thor being completely just older than Odin, straight up, which is interesting. Obviously, I understand you're competing that to Odin having sex with the world, basically, and that producing Thor. He says that they're not even actually related, and he's only a son in the same way that Loki. That was the only actual relation. So it's very interesting when you listen to like Manly P. Hall talk about that. But the same thing can be said about Tyr, and that Tyr was the sky god. I've heard him tied to the Teutons. Again, the Tyr, the Teutons. They called him Tu instead of Tyr, and they were the Teutons. So I've heard this quite a bit, and I honestly give it credence. I don't know about the Tor part, but the Tyr part I do give credence, and probably the Tor part I could even somewhat see. I also can give that credence because Odin becomes the All-Father. He becomes king of the gods. So he doesn't necessarily start out that way. But then you also would have to balance that against that the world was created by Odin, Vili, and Ve. But then that's also doesn't dissuade that they could have still existed. And then he took and basically arranged the world as he saw fit, and then became something more than them, and then now they're in his world, and whereas before that they weren't. So there could be some credence to that. And once again, when you tie that to some of the more localized mythologies rather than the Norse, where they put Balder as a human at one point, but Odin was distinctly a god. Does Balder then have to go through the god test to become a god? Because that part is still very valid in that story. So was Odin at one point in time just a human, went through the god test and became more, again, when you're talking about dead languages and dead theologies and things that you're having to bring back, and then you're having to filter out so much disinformation, hard stuff. Hard stuff.
Yeah, man. I heard too, recently I was doing some research, and J-A, means sky, and Ptah or Peter means father. So Jupiter or Yapata, whatever, means sky father. And I thought it was interesting. And then I was watching that Norseman show, and they kept saying Valhall. And you know how letters can get all mixed up. And then so I was looking up
Right.
what Va meant. And it turns out that it means sky also. And so Valhall or Valhalla is like the sky hole.
The hole in the sky.
The hole in the sky. Yeah, dude. And then I started to think of a fucking Black Sabbath song, you know, hole in the sky, take me to heaven. And I was like, this can't just be accidental. But, you know, who knows?
That's fascinating, because then you also get all the Aryan stories and the stories where they go in like inside the earth, but then that inside the earth includes a basic beam of light that shoots into the sky, which again then brings you to the toroidal field.
Yeah.
But in that toroidal field, we live on the plane of inertia.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, like that still brings us at like basically that's what I think we live in, is a cosmic egg, a toroidal field that has a plane of inertia where humans are able to operate.
Yeah.
And so basically going to the center of that plane of inertia, and you know, yeah, fucking fascinating.
Yeah, man.
It's a good one.
Skyhole. Anyways, well, thank you, Benjamin, for joining us today, man. Too bad Romy couldn't stick around, but it's the way it goes sometimes. Appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you and Mario with Andy next week sometime. And
yeah, Mario has some fire. Ooh.
Yeah, I know, because he does a lot of that fucking star stuff, dude, with the North Star and everything, and a lot of that stuff that he talks about just connects on so many levels for me. And when I heard you and
we see
him,
eye to eye on a lot.
when I heard you and him talking together, and you guys were bringing up Bach Saga a little bit, I was like, oh man, it'd be so great to have these two on the Deep Chill with us and just talk about it. Just because, you know, there's not very many people out there that even know about the saga or can talk about it in a non-saga way, or bring in these other aspects to it to try to, you know, extend it out and to the other possibilities. So
I think it's got a lot of value, and I hope that doesn't get lost, and I hope the work we're putting in even helps flesh out some of the parts that I think Eeyore was messing up, you know, for his own personal reasons.
Yeah.
So I think it's got a lot of validity, and I hope that this is you know, something that helps keep it alive.
Yeah, for sure, man. Well, go ahead and tell the good people where they can find you.
You bet. Benjamin Balderson. Rockfin is my main place where you can get the entire episodes of my shows. Other than that, I'm Benjamin Balderson on YouTube. You can find the things that I make at heathenwizards.com. And you can come on over to Flattoberfest and see the amazing presentation that I'm working on.
Where's that at?
That is going to be in South Carolina.
Excellent, man. You have a date?
You betcha.
Is there a date?
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Is there a date?
October 23rd and 24th and 25th, I think.
Excellent. Yeah, man. Support creativity, guys. You know. All right. Thanks for
absolutely.
Thank you, Fire Tribe, for joining us. We appreciate you. And wake up.
The ashes.